it seems like every year there's always a waterway boat mishap, if I'll put it that way. You know, there's always an accident here, there. We hear of, okay, the boat's capsized, you know, and all of that. And I think the most recent that happened was the one that happened in Anambra, which took the life of an actor and some crew members. And I think recently bodies of some of the crew members were found, and I think they're still in search for one more. So, yes. So, but just generally, Mr. Sunday, how do you feel? How did you feel when you heard about it?
Oh, well, it's been a recurring decimal in the country, and it's sad that such should continue. But, however, I think that is much of an accident than deliberate action to destroy lives. So, how do we manage it? It's more frequent even in the north. You know, in the north, they send us the news.
We've had cases in Taraba.
Exactly, Taraba, Adamawa, and all those areas. And we could get the figures like 20, 30, lives being lost. And at the end of the day, they just pass as news. But when it happened in this part of Nigeria, when celebrities are involved, then it becomes national discourse.
Okay.
All right? So we now take it to a higher level. But other parts, we just report them as news, and they just go. So it's really an unfortunate thing. It's not creative. It's just accident, which, however, can be managed.
Okay. So we've seen the National Inland Waterways Authority, which is the regulatory body in charge of waterways in Nigeria. We've seen them put in measures. We've seen them, do things to make sure that such incidences don't happen. But what do you think? What do you think they are not doing right, if I'll put it that way?
Yeah, I think government is actually not putting in more effort into the inland.
So the effort is not enough.
Inland waterways in the country. Okay. Administration. Like for instance, if you take the broad waterways in Nigeria, you look at the continental shelves. The ocean banks. The ocean shelves, the continental shelves into the Atlantic. Okay? They have more regulations in that axis than they have in the inland waterways. All right? For instance, the Navy will tell you, okay, that they have now extended Nigerian territorial waters to about, in the past, about 8 nautical miles to 20 nautical miles. Okay? And they also tell you, we'll have the equipment that can sight as far as that 20 nautical miles into the Atlantic. After which you are no longer in Nigerian territory. Okay? You are now in the international waters. Okay? Now you have the activities of pirates and all that, within our territorial waters. Okay? Where you have the trawlers who go on fishing and all that. And then they set out in the massa and all that to manage all those areas. Now the NPA is there to regulate the incoming of ships, cargo ships from the international waters, where Nigerian pilots are also trained to get to that territorial border, to bring in these cargoes. So you see that there are more administration on that continental shelf, not because of the high level of commerce, and industrial activities, than in the inland waterways. If you go deep into the new one you mentioned, you now check that most of the debate or discussion in that agency is about how to dredge Nigerian waterways, not how to regulate activities of Nigerian waterways. On the Nigerian waterways. Okay? Now, if you look at these boat mishaps in the country, they are being operated by locals who are not even guided by any...
properly trained.
Or properly trained, okay, by any agency of the government. So the government is quick to respond to say, we are mourning this, we are condemning this, whereas the government has not put in proper regulation in the use of the inland waterways. You get it. So I think this is one area the government has not come. Because, like I said earlier, if you go into discussion, going into the other inland waterways administration, it's more about, we are going to dredge this, we are going to dredge that. The managing director of that agency hardly knows the location of these waterways. He sits there at the headquarters in
But I think they've also been emphasis on security measures. And still coming back to the recent issue that happened in Anambra, which of course everyone now knows that one of the mistakes that were made there was the fact that they didn't have a life jacket on. You know, so I think another thing the authority has been hammering on is on safety measures. But now, just like you've said, but from another angle, it also looks like the emphasis of the regulatory body has been on probably Lagos waterways and other major, because I personally, I think I've been on for a few times, you know, I've used the water transport system to move, and I've seen how serious the workers there are on making sure you have a life jacket. And once the life jacket is finished, you're not taking another person into the boat, you know. So those people being put in place to make sure that those measures are obeyed and followed, you know, were there. But like you said, looking at the waterways we have in the country, the local ones, it looks like more attention is on Lagos, you know, and other key areas, and those other local areas are kind of neglected. Do you agree?
It may not be necessarily so, because the Lagos you have cited, you know, I think it's being managed by the state government. If you go to Ikorodu Jetty, for instance, where they have to ferry people from that axis into the island, you will see it's being managed by Lagos state government. So most of the jetties in Lagos state, in the states are being managed by the state government, and that is why you could see the enforcement there. But they have also not talked about the regulation. Okay, I think it's also being regulated.
So can we say it should be a state? So each state should have like their own regulatory body, because I think recently there was a court ruling on the establishment of the fact that NIWA is the regulatory body for all waterways across Nigeria. So are we saying that it should be a state thing, so each state should handle their water?
Yeah, I think I want to be very clear that it is not in the exclusive list in the Constitution.
Okay.
The management of waterways. Let me just put on that assumption, because I think sometime about 2 years ago, there was a proposed bill in the National Assembly that the federal government wants to take over all the waters in the country, including the ones in the interior villages, whereas they cannot even manage the one that is directly under their own jurisdiction. Okay? The new one you mentioned, they have headquarters in Lokoja, that is Kogi State. I'm not sure the managing director knows the location of these inland waters, let alone the waterways. So the regulations should go beyond wearing life jackets. Okay? Now, when I was a boy, you know, if I come on holidays, during holidays, so I used to move to go to Tapa Bay during Christmas, Easter, and other celebrations. But if you see how the boats are being overcrowded, nobody's regulating that.
Which is another vital
because these are issues.
Yeah.
If it is regulated, the boats will not be overcrowded.
Shouldn't be, yes.
You will see in a ferrying boat, they will arrange like 4, 3, 5 persons on one row.
One row.
And that is how it's going to be in secret. So the boat will be carrying
That's
about...
so much weight already.
Has so much weight. About 25, 30 persons. And we just... When the wave comes, sometimes it just splashes out the water inside the boat. They will not use plate to start.
To take it out.
You know, so these are issues. And because there's nobody who regulates this thing. What is the weight of a given boat? And what is the capacity? How many people can it carry? So when you leave it to the locals, they are looking at the money they are going to get.
Yes.
So they will push in as many people as possible.
And they move as fast as possible.
So they move as fast as possible.
Risk or plus risk.
Exactly. And you are moving on the water surface that the current is coming at all time, putting the people at risk. As I speak to you, I can't even go to Tapa Bay again because I can't enter those boats anymore. I can't take the risk. You get it? Yeah. So let alone, you know, other locals.
All right. I think we have Mr. Achike. Hello, Mr. Achike. So glad to have you join us.
Can you hear me? It's a pleasure.
All right, we're so glad to have you join us on the discussion for today. So we're talking about the safety of the waterways in Nigeria, and we're looking at the regulatory body, which is the National Inland Waterways Authority, and we're also looking at how, okay, instead, let me just ask you, do you think that the regulatory body has done enough so far in making sure such reoccurring cases of mishap, on our waterways, accidents and capsizing issues coming up? Do you think the authority, the regulatory body, has done enough to help prevent such issues?
So I'm saying that I'm not exactly sure that there's been much activity in that sector, at least on the part of the regulatory agencies. It would seem to be one sector that has been very, very well, that has been well neglected over the years. Of course, and I think the reason is clear. Water transportation in this country has not attracted the kind of attention it should attract on the part of the government. And so it is an area that has been very, very underfunded. And so when you do not have serious regulatory activities in such a sector by the federal authorities, the possibility of people breaking the rules and just for the purpose of profit is exceedingly very high. And in the process, people's lives are endangered. And I think that this is what has been going on for quite some time. It's just that somehow, maybe miraculously, we have not had but it has taken this particular incident. Of course, it's been happening. Incidences like this have been happening for quite some time. But like the guest said, when it involves somebody of celebrity status, and again with the activities on social media, it makes it more widespread. And so there's a tendency for the information to get around in record time to a lot of people. And that brings, again, attention from government agencies. And so I think that this is what has happened in this particular instance. You are talking about life jackets or life vests. How much is it a life vest? It's not expensive, so they are obviously, this boy would likely, the people that died in this particular boat mishap would likely have been alive if they had at least, a life jacket for their own protection and safety. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So if we are talking about regulation, government is almost absent in that sector. Because again, it's one could almost say it is a forgotten sector, from that perspective. So obviously much more needs to be done, absolutely. But if you're talking about supervision or regulation, no, that sector has been neglected for far too long.
So, still on the regulatory agency issue, concerns were raised that NIWA's inability to efficiently regulate activities of boat operators, across the country, that's Nigeria as a whole, and the call was raised to review the act establishing NIWA's control over the waterways in the country as a whole. So there are concerns that NIWA might not be able to cover all those little, I don't know if I could call them little, but cover the whole waterways in general. So there was concerns that instead of having one body cover all, probably it could be like a state thing, or a local government. Because looking at this recent issue that happened, it was obvious that things were not put in place to make sure that safety measures were being applied in that particular port or what would I call it? But I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. So do you agree? Do you think that the act should be reviewed?
Well, that is the essence of the law. The law must be made to meet with the changing times. And so laws are dynamic because society is dynamic, and laws are meant for the regulation of human activities within society. So as society evolves, and as new trends develop, then the laws must also be reformed or changed to keep in tune with these changing dynamics. And so obviously there is a missing link somewhere. Again, the people have been talking about less government or less government in certain activities in the country. And it would appear that the situation with waterways is something that might be a bit challenging for the government, just like you said, controlling all the waterways in the country might be too much, for a government that is already saddled with all manners of other onerous responsibilities. So devolving this to the state, I think would make a lot of sense. But the states tend to be very arbitrary in the way they go about their things, carrying out their duties and responsibilities. They tend to be looking always at the need for revenue, and so not everything is about revenue, but it's about the states spending, money at least for the purpose of ensuring that the safety of the citizens, rather than turning it into a cash cow, because that is where my concern is. And from that perspective, before you know it, the prices, for the charges on even operators of the boats and all the other surrounding issues will be exceedingly too high and unaffordable. So this has the potential to keep these people out of the business. Or when they're in the business because they're not making much, they look for other ways, again, to compromise the system so that they can also, magnify their profit. So that is what. So in terms of proximity, in terms of, I think that the states should be in a better position to give proper supervision and monitoring of these inland waterways, not the federal government. But the states must also be made to do it in a way that is humane. That because that, like I said, that's the problem I tend to have with most of the states in the country. And they seem to put revenue above other social considerations.
Right, so coming back to the studio, so Mr. Sunday, where do we go from here? What's the way forward? I think Mr. Achike has already, started giving in some tips on how better the waterway system could work. So what should we do better? What's the way forward? What should the government do? But I also want to point out the facts before you speak, that in as much as we are pointing faults to the government, but I think sometimes the fault also comes from the citizens, because at some point, but again, it still comes back to the government, because I mean, if there's an established law that you must do this, you must do this, you must do this before boarding a jetty or a ferry, you don't have an option than to take it or you leave. So let me come back to you. What's the way forward? Where do we move from here? How do we make our waterways safer? What should the government do better?
Well, it's a very complicated issue.
Okay.
Because there are also waterways in the hinterlands that are not accessible to much population.
Mm.
So it's just for the locals to use those waterways, either going to farm or any other thing. Okay? If you go to the Niger Delta, for instance, you could see people moving from one community to the other through waterways.
Boat, yes.
Okay, on boats. So those ones are there. But for those in the urban centers, in big towns, okay, I think that is where the interest of government should come.
Okay.
Because it is one sector, apart from the government being negligent of that sector, it's also one sector that economic activities in the inland waterways have not been so high. We talked about the continental shelf, going into the Atlantic. You go and check, you see how many institutions government has set up to manage that area, that aspect of Nigerian waterways. But the inland waterways have not really been driving much economic activities to that high level that will now begin to say, oh, government must do this. Because government will also weigh, okay, if we put in funds here, what is going to be the return? No one is afraid of government generating revenue from commercial activities. No. As long as it's functional and safe, generate revenue. There's no cost for now. Okay? Like you cited in Lagos, for instance. You go to the jetty. Yeah. You see how it's working. And the boats are not the same with that which you find in the locals.
Yes.
If you go to Bonikama, it's quite obvious. They'll just put wood together, put engine boats, and they are flying.
And they are off.
So you see, these are issues of risk, the overcrowding of the boats and all that. So when you regulate, we're not saying come and put in your money. Encourage the private sector to invest in those areas. Those zones, those areas, the big towns, where there are commercial activities, that it will generate revenue even for the investor himself, encourage that, and you encourage that. Give them incentives, give them facilities. Let's move on. The hinterlands could also be neglected because you see the responsibility of government, apart from those rivers, big rivers, where they could go and develop dams for electricity and irrigation and all that. They don't even care about any other waterways. In the past, I do hear of, of people bringing fish from Lokoja to Onitsha market through the waterways. I don't know if it's still obtained now. They will get the fish dried off and they will take them en masse, through the waterways. They transport them down to Onitsha, where they now have to sell and go back through the water. I don't know if it's still going on now. So there are so many ways you can also. So the government, if government looks into it, they can also improve on this, on these facilities. Like I said earlier, because even the one you mentioned, it's even underfunded. I don't know if you have been privileged to even interact with one or two officials. The thing is, it's grossly underfunded. Yeah. So the activities are also limited to the fund available to them. They can't even train personnel. They can't even, so in most cases, they don't even go beyond paying salaries. And we'll be here saying they are not, they're not functioning, but they are grossly underfunded. So the agency is grossly underfunded. So, it's it overall. Maybe you just sit this thing to the responsibility to the states. To the
states, right? Okay.
Definitely.
All right. So that means you're on the same page with Mr. Achike as well. All right.